Hello everyone, this is my presentation for WPA-GO's Graduate Research Series. My presentation is titled New Wave Tsunami, Speaking for Code Meshing and World Englishes as the Future of Academic and Professional Language. My name is Jason Guest and I am a candidate for Texas State University's Master of Arts in Rhetoric and Composition, due to graduate over the summer of 2023. Much of my interest is in helping underserved populations, which has led me to the research for this presentation. English has positioned itself as the common language of the world. However, it has many dialects, or as is more appropriate to say, varieties of the language. These are some of the terms that you need to be familiar with for this presentation. SAE is Standard Academic or American English. Dialect or variety of language is a particular form of a language which is peculiar to a specific region or social group. So English itself has several different dialects or varieties. There is Appalachian English, there is Southern English, Boston. Code switching promotes the use of one dialect over another, depending on social or cultural context, to project a specific identity. That's thanks to April Baker Bell in her book. Code switching is, for example, when you will see someone who uses Black language switch to SAE in business or academic spheres. Code meshing allows polylingual speakers to write or speak in SAE and in their native languages or dialects at the same time. So this is where native speakers of another language will put in some of their own words when they are speaking or writing. Spanglish is one example of this. World Englishes is English as adopted by cultures around the globe, often characterized by being code meshed with the native language of the culture. Spanglish is an example of this as well. In my research methods class for my degree, we were told to look for the felt gap, or the place where we believe the current research had a missing piece that we could address with our own research. I believe there is another reason to do research: felt activism. This is a term that, as far as I know, I came up with, that means when you want to add your voice to those calling for change in some area. This project contained both for me. The felt activism can be found by authors April Baker Bell, who promoted Black language, Athelstan Suresh Kanagaraja, who promotes World Englishes, and Vershawn Ashanti Young, who promotes code meshing. Now, the felt gap can be shown by this quote by James D. Nichol. The problem with defending the purity of the English language is that we don't just borrow words. On occasion, English has pursued other languages down alleyways to beat them unconscious and rifle their pockets for new vocabulary. English is a language that code meshes and borrows other words very often. What are some vocabulary that SAE writers code mesh that you can think of? You might have thought of any of the terms written in Greek or Latin, which seem to be automatically accepted in SAE: ethos, logos, pathos, kairos. You might have also thought of perhaps the title of my presentation, Tsunami, where we borrowed a word from Japanese instead of making up our own word for a giant seismically induced ocean wave. Now, do you believe there is a standard academic or American English? Does your institution believe there is one? Are you pressured to encourage writers to code switch? Is that pressure implicit or explicit? And is it by your own beliefs or by your institution? Those are just some questions for you to deliberate on. There are obvious positive outcomes for accepting code meshing and world Englishes in addition to SAE. For one, activists have been calling for the right for writers to use their own language since at least the mid-1970s, with the NCTE-CCCC's Students' Right to Their Own Language, or SRTOL, resolution in 1974. Code meshing allows writers to embrace all facets of their identity in their writing. It allows for richer, more colorful rhetoric, vocabulary, and syntax in writing. Now, in addition to this, Kanagaraja tells us that valuing students' own languages, in this case non-prestige varieties of English, helps in the acquisition of other dialects, including the socially valued dominant varieties. So students who are not shamed in their language are more likely to learn SAE than those who are shamed. However, there are also hurdles to accepting code meshing in world Englishes, as well as negative effects currently associated with not accepting them. One of the hurdles is that an instructor who isn't fluent in the native language of a writer won't know if a phrase in a writer's native language or dialect is more rhetorically impactful than SAE or not. To address this, we need to decolonize and de-racialize the classrooms and professional spaces. Now, code meshing currently is fetishized in creative works. Hispanic authors, Black authors, it's considered very cool when they write in code meshing. Making it standard would counter this fetishization. There is also a effect called code censoring, which is an act of code switching imposed on oneself because of undeniable outside forces. This harks back to shaming speakers of other dialects and languages into only speaking SAE. This is a student sample from one of my students in a first-year English class writing an MRAD paper. And that is a scientific research paper, but for the class we had given it a literary bent. So they write, "To give a little insider background, I will walk you through the history and even point out some of the lyrics to give you a clear understanding of everything that will be presented. Childish Gambino created This Is America in 2018. If you can remember correctly, in late 2017 and early 2018, police brutality was very high, especially in the Black community. Now, our knee-jerk reaction due to SAE would be to criticize the number of times the student uses I. However, if we can look past that, the rhetorical practice they set out of explaining the path of the paper and then following that path overcome, in my opinion, the lack of proper SAE. I find the rhetoric to be more important than the language. This is a movement that each individual, whether they are writing program staff or faculty, will have to take steps toward on their own. I think this quote by Mina Shaughnessy portrays what each of us is striving for and what we would have help finding if we abandoned the strict adherence to SAE that we have been taught. And she tells us, somewhere between the folly of pretending that errors don't matter and the rigidity of insisting that they matter more than anything, the teacher must find his answer, searching always under pressure for shortcuts that will not ultimately restrict the intellectual power of his students. Here is the information for the quotes I used in the presentation, which also work as a good jumping off point for anyone interested in pursuing this topic further. I would also point you back to the authors listed near the beginning of the presentation as good examples of proponents of my call to augment SAE with code meshing in world Englishes in academic and professional spaces. Thank you for listening and watching, and I hope you all have a good life. Thank you.